Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to Dice and Mind, a monthly podcast in which we explore the meaning of life through the lens of RPGs.
We're lifelong friends, a couple of guys in their 40s who along the way had families and became professionals. Over the years, we've talked about pretty much everything. But recently, we realized we both had an interest and some history with tabletop role-playing games. So,
In each episode, we will consider everyday stuff like science, religion, philosophy, and economics, all through the lens of a specific role-playing game and its dice mechanic. For example, what would I have to roll in the Edge of the Empire narrative dice system to get that promotion at work?
or would getting that paper published give me advantage on a subsequent D20 roll in Dungeons & Dragons?
If I were DM, likely not. But join us now and every month to think deeply, geek out, and explore how RPGs make the world just a little bit better.
This is
Dice in Mind.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dice and Mind podcast. I am thrilled to be sitting here with my very good friend, Brian. We're sitting here across the digital divide because on the one hand, we still have a pandemic, and on the other hand, we do live approximately 300 miles apart. That's my fault, not his. Brian, thanks so much for being with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is great that we have an opportunity to do this finally.
Yeah, it is. I know like we were just talking before we started recording that Brad and I have been talking about getting you on from before we started recording the very first episode. And so this is really cool. So a little bit of background, listeners. Brian and I have been friends for what I think officially qualifies now as a long time.
I would say so.
I would say, yeah. We were in junior high, and I think you essentially introduced yourself to me. Like, you approached me, didn't you?
Well,
or did we just run into each other?
I was good friends with your brother, and we were in band together and a few classes, and so I had known who you were, but actually we met more formally in driver's ed.
Right. That's I've suppressed so much of that, but I know you're right.
So that's a long time. I suppose you can say that's.
Well, given that my older daughter is now through her first 50 hours required and is driving me around everywhere with her permit, yeah, I would say that that's been a while.
That has been, yeah.
It has,
and we're still friends. I mean, so that has to say something.
Well, it does say something, Brian, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we are still friends primarily because you married so well. I think it's fair to say we all love your wife, but you're all right too. So we're.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, glad you took that compliment and ran with it. No, we are talking to all of you guys who are listening to this podcast. Thank you for that, as always. Brian and I thought we might just have a little fun, not so much reminiscing, but starting with that, because like by the time I met you, I mean, you already knew what you were doing with at least one, if not more, RPGs, and you were kind of instrumental in introducing me to that. And even though every time you GM'd, I got my butt kicked within literally the first 10 to 15 minutes. That'll make sense when we explain the game.
Sure.
I loved it. And even now, so let me think about this for a sec. I met you when I was in 8th grade, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
In 7th.
Yep. So 8. I was 13. So even though this was 33 plus years ago.
Wow. When you put that into perspective, that's
and as we're recording this, everybody, Brian literally yesterday had a birthday. I'm just going to say he is still not yet 50, and we're going to leave it at that. Because we all are within a year of each other.
Yeah.
That's about as far as I need to go. But 33 years ago, and even though it was that, and even though I haven't played that game since the last time we played it upstairs in your bedroom at your parents' house on the floor with our stuff spread out.
Oh
So, I
yeah,
mean, that would have been like high school.
that would have been easily.
I
Yeah.
don't think we played by college.
No, I think
Maybe.
we had moved on to other games
Right.
since then. But we're talking about BattleTech or
Yeah.
MechWarrior is the game.
Yeah.
And I had gotten into that. I was up at we would go on vacation to a cabin up north in northern Wisconsin, and we'd have some friends up there, and I was introduced to BattleTech by one of the other guests at this resort that we were at, and learned how to play it. And for those who don't know, BattleTech, it's the mech. It's kind of like Robotech. I don't know if people have watched that cartoon. That was a big thing for me when I was growing up. The Robotech cartoons, but BattleTech is kind of like the generic version of Robotech, but made into a role-playing game. But for the most part, the BattleTech component of it is just basically the mechanics of fighting in mechs.
And dying, I should say, a lot of dying.
Yeah, a lot of dying. There's definitely a lot of that, but it wasn't necessarily the role-playing game. It was more of a board game that had some rules, and you could design your mech and that sort of thing. But it wasn't really about interpersonal reactions. MechWarrior was the role-playing game version of that, and that allowed you to go from the battlefield to interpersonal or one-on-one person-to-person interactions and a real adventure type thing. But the BattleTech, I really liked it because it was mechanical. It was kind of gritty. It had a lot of rules. You could learn the rules, and it was very precise. I mean, yeah, it was a D6, a 2D6 system. So every roll was 2d6, and depending on the complexity of what it was mostly shooting weapons. You needed to hit a certain target, and then you would hit a certain number, and you would hit your target, and then you'd have to roll for damage and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit like the battle side of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's very simplified with the D6. So it was very easy to get into, a lot of rules, and I think part of the reason that it ended up in a lot of dying was that it was rather unforgiving in that if if you didn't know exactly how a certain weapon was going to overheat, you could blow up. So and that would happen a lot. And I think that's what really drew me to BattleTech, was that it was very deterministic. Actions have consequences, and you can kind of predict how things were going to go. There was a little bit of chance involved, but for the most part, it really got into the mechanics of things, the heavy on the mechanics side, and I really enjoyed that. And I think that kind of plays through in my life, in my career. I'm an application developer, so I do programming, and it played very well into that. But of course, there's the other part of that. Once you get into MechWarrior, creating characters, that's when it really started getting fun, because, well, in addition to all the add-ons that you could have with Belltech and MechWarrior, there was the space travel and combat module. The whole, I mean, you could spend as much money as you wanted on Belltech and still have more things. It's a
huge franchise.
It is. It was, or at least for the budget that I had at the time, which wasn't much.
We did not have much of a budget at the
No. But that didn't stop me from buying all these modules for it. But it's, as with any role-playing game, I guess. But
right.
But what really was neat about it was that it could expand and I could grow with it. So designing mechs, that was one thing. Okay, so what if I added this weapon instead of that weapon, or that sort of thing? Kind of got you thinking a little bit more creatively. But then, and I think we got into this quite a bit, where we started designing ships or designing. Well, in any role-playing game, you design your universe. You can,
right.
And especially with something that involves space travel, you can have planets, you can have solar systems, and it really thrusts you into a realm where you can get as deep as you want into the science of it. So we would design a planet. It's like, okay, how big is the planet? How far is it away from the star is it? What's its orbit? How what's its year? How long is the year? How long is the day? Does it have moons? How fast do the moons rotate? You can get as in depth and as accurate as you want based on things that you learned in physics class or wherever else.
And I remember, just to interrupt for a sec, that's what I've been thinking about, because I remember that level of detail, and I remember how much we would certainly I would geek out over the fact that it was just so realistic. Even the mechs, which of course were totally make-believe, but it was like they explained the future science of it and the physics of it, and like why things would overheat or when they get damaged, right? And there was also that, because you're making it sound super mechanical, and it was, but it also did have, I thought, a really interesting backstory that you could ignore or use, but it was just such a cool universe to do all of that.
Right. And I think that's the type of thing that kind of carries through with all role-playing games that we've gotten into, Star Wars, Star Trek, Dungeons and Dragons, where you can really get involved, you can really get detailed about things. You can be an architect. You can explore what's the shape of this building, what are the rooms, how are the rooms oriented, where are the walls, is there a secret door here, or that sort of thing, which for a teenager, well, even as an adult, being able to explore that type of creativity, and you basically have carte blanche to do whatever you want with that universe, to create something and create a narrative, create a storyline, and then apply it. So regardless of what you start with, whether it's Belltech, Star Trek, Star Wars, D&D, I think we latched on to the space or science fiction ones versus the fantasy ones, more so, at least early on, just because, well, we were into Star Trek, Next Generation, and we would actually have watch parties for that back in the day. So that kind of appealed to us, of having space travel as a component to any kind of role playing that we would do.
Without question.
Right. But there are a lot of different things, and that's what I really enjoy about role playing in general, is that ability to explore, that ability to learn and apply that knowledge to certain things. Earlier we were talking about how you can really geek out with some of the stuff, and I don't know if I played I had a game that I played. I'm not sure if it was with you or our friend Scott.
What was that?
Where I wanted a soundtrack for it, and so I took the soundtrack from The Abyss, the movie, and I knew that there was going to be a sequence where I needed to have like a high energy soundtrack going, but it could go on for 20 minutes, and the soundtrack wasn't that long, so I actually had to take my tape recorder and start splicing, looping it over on top of itself multiple times in order to get the length of the soundtrack that I wanted for the game. So was that with you, or was that with somebody else?
I would think I'd remember that, just the sheer, because of the discussion we would have had about it after the fact. I don't think that was me.
But that's something that's completely unrelated to the game, but it added to it by exploring something else that completely. But I think that's says something about all of us that are involved with this, is that we look at something, we say, okay, how can we make this better, or how can we improve on what we already have, and how can we expand it? And we find fun ways to do that, and we learn as we go along. I think it's pretty safe to say that we were all geeks growing up in high school, and
I think that's pretty safe to say.
Right. And this appealed to our geek nature.
And here we are, 30 plus years later, talking about it. So, some things don't change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm finding I'm finding that this podcast has the gift of making me intermittently feel young and old as we, because you think back like we're doing now of how long ago we got into it. But then I also think of, and yet here we are in our mid 40s, right? With home lives. And again, Brian's got a lovely wife, hence the ongoing relationship of friendship. And that's not true. That's not fair. I'm sorry. You guys have really cute dogs too. But
our redeeming qualities here, yeah.
It really is. I mean, it's not, I'll just stop there. But no, it is. It's but after all this time, it's like what you were saying before, I think. The sense of play and fun and creativity, the intellectual freedom to think about this stuff. I find it at this point in life even more compelling than I did when I was a kid.
Right. And you just said something that kind of reminded me of another topic that applies here. When we create our characters, we're kind of creating versions of ourselves a little bit. And we're talking about how long we've been friends, and we have a friendship that's, I think it's very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to talk every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to even every month.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get together, and the last few years we've been able to get together at least once a year.
Yep. No time has elapsed.
Nothing. It's as if we had seen each other the day before.
Yep.
We pick up right where we left off, and we're just as close as we ever were. But I think that for myself, and this gets into the characters that we create in role playing, I've always tended to lean towards the Han Solo or a dwarf type character.
And your D&D dwarf is hilarious. I love that.
And of course, these are, and I just read the description of what dwarves are, and how their loyalty is hard earned, but once you have it, they're loyal.
Yeah.
And I could say the same thing about the Han Solo character type, where he doesn't make friends easily, but when you're his friend, he's there. He has your back.
And anyone who's close to you know that is you 100% when it comes to loyalty and integrity.
Well, I think there's an aspect of that in all of us, of our group of friends, where we in junior high school, we didn't make friends easily. When we did make friends, we were friends for life. And this conversation is a testament to that.
Which is, I think, why so many of us feel sorry for Eric, but that's a whole other conversation. That he's still friends with all of us. He could have done so much better. But the rest of us, I think this makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
Well, this is excellent. Thank you so much for sitting down with me, specifically in this capacity, because we were already overdue for a chat anyways.
Of course.
Brad promised, he keeps telling me he's good to go now that he's got a little more free time on his calendar to play D&D. And listeners, you might have picked this up actually from some previous episodes, but so Brad and Brian and I have very sporadically been playing D&D. But between me sliding into summer session, between Brad having a little more time on his hands for the foreseeable future, you stepping down from a really significant role in public leadership, hopefully selfishly, we'll actually be able to connect in maybe in the next weeks and have less sporadic games and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. We did have a few adventures that we had started and kind of got sidetracked on, but we can, as with our friendships, with a role-playing game, a campaign, you can pick up where you left off.
Yep, that's right. All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.